St.Amant here. Okay, so I had this idea for a journal, and I thought this is going to be really fun. I don't know, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just had this idea, and what brought me to, or what inspired me to create this was thinking about homemade papers. And I don't make homemade papers, but I wanted a way to, repurpose papers that I have to make them feel and look like they were homemade. So I had this idea, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to use a variety of different spices because I can get colors and textures and probably some really neat effects. And then I'm going to create a journal called the Spice Cupboard Journal. And eventually what I'll do is create a journal from this box. This is just a box that I get my essential oils in. So this will be the case for it, and then we'll have the journal inside. So we'll work on the cover after, but first I want to, show you how we can prepare some paper. So I have some rice paper here, and the reason why I'm using rice paper, it's nice and thin, and we're going to be able to see the spices and stuff through the other side. So the first thing we're going to do is just get some good old-fashioned Mod Podge glue. And I think the best thing to use is like an old credit card or something, just to smear it. And we're going to literally cover the whole surface with glue. So make sure the whole surface is wet. And then I've got a variety of different spices in different colors. I've got some bay leaf here, and we're just going to get them on the sheet of paper like so. And I think I've got a little bit of thyme. Like so. And then what we are going to do is put another piece of paper on top. Now, I didn't really think about the space here. If you want to get a little more on there, you can. But I just like when I see homemade papers, like the little flecks and the different colors and the cool things. So I'm going to get another piece of rice paper here and get some Mod Podge on the other side, and we're pretty much just going to sandwich it. I'm going to move my spices over. And we should be able to get some textures out of it too. And I've got other spices. I'll show you what I'm using. You can try whatever's in your spice cabinet, but I selected these particular ones for their colors and textures. Okay, so you're just gonna basically sandwich with your rice paper over top. Whoop. And just gently press down. I'm just going to get a bone folder, but I'm not going to go too hard because I don't want it to tear. I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool if it did tear a little bit, because then you would see more of that color underneath. But just going to press down to get those little papers in between, and look how cool that is. And you can see it on both sides. Can you see that? I think it's so neat. And then another thing that we can do if you want to get a little more color into it is I've got some turmeric and paprika and that kind of stuff. And I think once it hits the glue, it's really going to Oh, and that's nice. It's going to make such a nice little book. So I'm going to put that aside to dry. I'm going to get a couple other pieces of paper. And there's two sides to the rice paper. There's like a smooth side and a rough side. Now that one, I used the rough side on the inside. This time I'm going to use the smooth side on the inside because I want the texture, the rough texture to come through. So let me get my glue down. Okay, let's get some turmeric. And I think I'll mix a couple flecks of, oh, peppercorn. Let's do that. In this paper. Okay. A little more turmeric here. Ooh, it smells, it's spicy in here. Okay. I'll get another piece of rice paper. Whoopee. And I think another way that you can do this is if you just let this dry. You can use the sheet like that. I just didn't want the stuff to come loose on it, so I'm doing it this way, but I'm going to really, you know, experiment both ways so I can get a variety of textures. And there's a little bit of turmeric on the glue over here, and it's nice because it's tinting the paper. So that should be really nice once we get this one on here. I'm just trying to make sure it's all covered. Okay. Oops. It's a little tricky here. Okay. Yeah, the color's coming through, which is really pretty. And it's subtle. This rice paper is very what's the word? Fragile. It's extremely thin. There's a little peppercorn that popped out. That one was fat, but look at that. You can see the color through it, and then you've got that nice bumpy texture. And I'm just gonna get rid of that peppercorn because it's a big bubble. But then when you go and you draw or you do ink over top of it, you've got a really nice texture on the background. So those are the two. How cool is that? I mean, I like that. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is try a variety of different papers. So I have some linen paper here, and we're going to do the same thing. Get some Mod Podge on there. Okay. Get a little, I've got these really cool little pepper flakes. So I'm going to put pepper flakes in there. Get a little bit of that thyme. And just kind of press down on the bigger flakes. But I'm just going to leave that to dry. Okay. Oops. And then what we'll do after is we'll do another coat of Mod Podge to seal it. Let's see. I want kind of the lighter tones here. There's another type of linen paper. It's kind of a off-white color. So you can just play around with this, continue making, you know, some interesting papers with your spices. Okay, make sure you're not scraping the glue off, you're just really using that to spread it. Okay, so I've got some paprika. I just love the look of the little flecks. Some cinnamon. And I've got some clove over here. I feel like I'm baking something up. And get that all in there. Oh, it smells like eggnog at Christmas. Okay, we'll let that one dry. And, oh, I've got another sheet here. Uh-oh, sticking. So, you don't have to go right to the edges because you don't, you know, you're not going to get the spices all over the place. Let's try a little bit of this bay leaf again. I like the color. And you can kind of scrunch it. And put a little bit of this turmeric down. And we'll just let that dry. Another thing that you can do is lay a piece of rice paper over the top if you want to seal it and not use 2 pieces of white rice paper. But I'm just going to leave it like this for now because I like to also use, you know, parchment paper to put over top of things when I'm making my journals. And I think what I'll do is let's try doing one with a sheet of parchment on top to seal it. Grab another piece of paper here just to get different textures. And that's just what it's about, is, you know, playing around and experimenting with a variety of textures and papers. And I've got some coffee filters too that I like to use, you know. Okay, I'll use rosemary on this one. And a little paprika. And I think I'll put a couple of these bigger flecks of bay leaf. And then I've got a scrap piece of parchment here that I'm just going to put over top. And actually, this is working out really nice. This looks good. And you could be a little more rougher with the parchment paper. You can use your bone folder to kind of, you know, get it in there. And there's a little bit of wrinkling happening too, which is nice. I'm just going to get a little more glue over here. Okay. This looks really nice. This turned out really nice. Look at that. So you've got the parchment over top. The only thing with parchment is when you're working on the surface, you've got to really have the right materials so it doesn't just, you know, wash off. I like to use my waxes on it, you know, any kind of like wax base or crayon based. If you've got some, gotta get a little more glue down here. If you've got like distress crayons, that kind of stuff, I think could work really well on this wax paper. But I'm liking how this is turning out right here, so I'll probably get some more parchment paper. And the other thing too is you can actually let this dry, the ones that we did, and then put more Mod Podge and parchment paper on top. But that's basically, you know, the technique in getting like textural papers without having to make your own paper. And the nice thing about the rice paper, once it dries, if you're using, you know, you want to do a little bit of washes or inks on top, it's going to absorb through the paper, and some of those areas are really going to pop out. Like even if I were to put a little bit of water here, see that, how it just completely, the color pops out. So we'll be able to do some nice stuff with that. Plus it smells really good when you're creating. It's like you're baking in the kitchen. Okay, so that's the paper making. So go ahead and create a bunch of your papers and have them ready so we can, you know, get to working on the spice cover journal. I'm so excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so before I send you off making all your little papers, before we get the book construction set up, I just want to show you another way you can, you know, create some unique textures using these spices. So just go ahead and just kind of squiggle on a little bit of that Mod Podge, and, you know, use your old credit card or whatever to spread it a bit, and then get, you know, your spices, sprinkle some on. Okay, and then just use your credit card to kind of work it into the glue, and it's going to go where it wants to go. It's going to stick where it wants to stick, and you're going to get, you know, some areas that have more color, some less, and you'll end up with paper that has, you know, some pretty colors on it. They just make for a really nice base when you're putting them in your journal, and then you can work art on top of it. So that's another way. Another thing that I was doing, let me just kind of get some of this glue off, or stuff off. So get some glue down, just as before, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. You can kind of work some of those spices off that were on your card a minute ago. It's going to add some color. And then you get some little flecks in there, whatever color tones that you want. Okay, get your spices in there. And then you can get a little more glue on top. And, you know, don't worry about it. It's going to be messy. It's going to be goopy. But when it dries, it's going to be fabulous. Okay, so you can leave it like that if you want for more of a seal. Or you can rip pieces of, what is this, parchment paper. Crinkle it up and kind of stick those randomly on top too in places, and then you're going to get like another layer of texture. And I assure you that when these dry, you are going to be so content to have these wonderful little pieces of paper that have texture to it, you know, a variety of color. And it's going to make for a truly unique art journal. So just get in there and experiment with your stuff, okay? And when that dries, What I would recommend is when it dries, you can flip it over and do the other sides of these paper, so that you've got two sides to work with. This was another one that I was doing here that has a little bit of parchment over it. Okay, and this one's almost drying, so I'm just going to add a little bit more glue just to kind of seal in all the yummy goodness. Okay, this will dry clear, but I just want to get, you know, these little flecks secure on there because I don't want to lose that. Okay, and just set them on a table to dry. You know, forget about it. Go have coffee, have your lunch, and when you're ready to join me with the construction of the journal, I mean, you could pause this video, do yours, and then come back and you'll see how we get it all put together. All right, awesome. We'll see you soon. Okay, so now we've glued some of our spices on. Now what I want you to do is get your brush out. I've still got some spices here, and you're just going to grab a piece of paper. I have a little piece of linen paper here. You could use watercolor paper. Wet your surface, and then start dipping your paintbrush into your spices to get color. We're just going to, you know, literally paint with spice. We're going to get some neat colors and textures, especially with that turmeric. Beautiful yellow color, and I've got some cinnamon and paprika. You know, just try different things. And you can put it on thicker in areas and thin in areas, and then you just get, you know, some really nice colored papers, and those little pieces of spice are going to dry right on there and kind of stick. So that's another way. I just did one with turmeric here. It's yellow. I think I'm going to add a little more of the paprika just to get a little more kind of browny tone, because I don't really want a full yellow book. I did want it kind of neutral, but we can add some more inks and stuff on top of that. But it's just a nice way to explore, you know, using materials such as or natural ingredients such as spices to, you know, get color on your paper and different textures. And I'm just kind of using my brush to smush it into the paper. There's a little bit of bay leaf on there and some other spices, because I'm just, you know, encouraging some of that color to come out. Look how pretty that is. I mean, this is going to be an interesting book. You probably, and it is quite messy, I will warn you, but it's, you know what, it's just all worth it in the end. That's why you have a production day, and you just get all your little papers and goodies out of the way. I mean, look how gorgeous that is. We're going to have these really cool papers. We're just resurfacing paper, and we're reusing them into wonderful little journals. So have fun. Create your pages, your surfaces, get some nice textures on there, and then it'll be well worth it when it comes time to putting the little book together. All right. Okay, so I'm going to show you another way to get a great texture for your spice cupboard journal. All right, so these are the sheets. This is the linen paper that I put some Mod Podge on and the spices. Now we're just going to finish it off to get that nice kind of homemade paper look. So you're going to add more Mod Podge. And you're just going to smear it the way you did the first time when we put the Mod Podge on. And then what I do is I take one of those, you know, little craft sponges, whoops, and just spread. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And you're just going to spread it around. Make sure you get the glue everywhere, covering the whole piece of paper. Okay. Okay, and once your paper is covered, you're going to take a piece of that rice paper, put the shiny side down. You want the texture facing up, and you're going to just lay it on top and just start rubbing the surface. And then with this one, you're going to get a nice, like, stiff, sturdy piece of paper. And then you can take your bone folder and just kind of rough it up a bit. Some of those little spices will start kind of peeking through. You know when you get homemade paper and you get those little natural specks that come through, that's what we're doing. And just work around everything. Okay, and then you're going to flip it over and you're going to do the other side. So make sure you've added spice to both sides of the paper. And the reason why I'm spreading it first rather than just using the sponge brush is I don't want the sponge to absorb all the glue. So I want to make sure I spread it on the surface, but the sponge is going to allow it to, you know, get into all those little grooves. Add a little more water if you need to. That way, you know, the glue's kind of running down all the nooks and crannies. I had a little bit of ink on this brush. I'm not really worried about it. I think it adds some more texture. But the nice thing when it's wet is it really pushes those colors through to the rice paper as well. But you don't want it too wet. I mean, don't soak it. So rough side up, shiny side down. And we're still sandwiching, but with this particular technique, you've actually got another piece of paper inside, because we did somewhere where we're just sandwiching the rice paper. With this one, we're adding that piece of paper inside, and this paper was a different color too, so you're going to get a nice variation in shades. So just kind of press down so it gets all around, you know, the spices. And if you want to go through with a bone folder and kind of rub some areas so some of those flecks start visually, whoops, I tore there, which is okay. A little tear here and there is actually nice, but just, you know, don't go tearing. But if you kind of burnish where those little seeds are and your little spices, it gets darker in those areas, which is really nice. And you can use a flat surface of your bone folder too, like this, so you're not too rough. But look how pretty that is. You know, it's very reminiscent of homemade paper. And once this dries, you're going to have that thicker kind of texture from it too. So you can do that with your other papers, and this is going to just end up looking really nice in our journal once we make it. Okay, so continue making your papers. Get a whole stack made. Now, my journal I'm going to do, because I'm going to fit into this box, and I will resurface this box, but I'm going to need sheets that are, let's see, I'm going to do squares. So my journal's going to end up being, I think I'm going to do a 6x6 inch journal. So I'm going to need, we're not folding the papers, we're actually cutting. My pages are going to be 6 by 6. So I can get 2 6x6 squares out of these rice paper. And then some of them we don't have, because I'm using an 8.5 by 11 underneath. I've got some edges where it's just the rice paper, which is totally fine. I mean, you'll see once we get to that stage how this is going to turn out, but I think this is looking really good. So I would make sure you have enough pieces of paper, like do at least 10 sheets of these textured paper, so you're prepared to make the journal. Okay, and it doesn't hurt to make extras. All right,